And then the ultimate villain of Christmas strikes. And worse than wanting to steal Christmas, he wanted to kill it.
It's really great to be able to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do that. And thank you so much for your support of the work that I'm doing through Engineering Ministries International in Uganda. So I want to take just a couple minutes to share some about that and a little bit about myself. But I'll start with what y'all have sent me to do. So I work with Engineering Ministries International. You can see our mission, vision, core values up there. But the one way to think about us is that we are kind of an engineering and architecture design and construction firm that serves Christian ministries around the world. We've been around since 1982, currently have offices in 10 different countries, and do more than 100 projects a year. And we are specifically serving ministries that are preaching the gospel and serving the poor. And the idea is that we are providing well-designed infrastructure that enables them to do that with excellence. So just a couple examples of the kinds of things that we're involved in. This is a solar microgrid that we installed at a Salvation Army mission in Zambia. This is a library at a school for impoverished children in Uganda. That we've actually been working with this ministry, the Amazima Ministries International, for more than 10 years, designing their schools and constructing them. This is a radio tower that is broadcasting gospel messages in the native Khmer language in Cambodia. And this is a inclusive playground that we built at a ministry that houses orphans with severe special needs in Uganda. And I just have a quote from one of the directors of that orphanage, which really captures what we as Engineering Ministries International want to see happening, right? The idea here is that we are relieving the burden of this infrastructure, of designing and constructing it. That's something God has called us to do and trained us to do. And if we can take that on, that allows the ministry to focus on what God has called them to do, which in this case is supporting and nurturing and loving these children. So it's a really fun ministry to be a part of. I get to work with all of these different clients and support them in the work they're doing. But I don't actually do any of this design work because I went to school for too long, so I ended up in research and development. So what R&D does is we've got kind of a lot of questions that arise at the intersection of bringing these designers from the US and the UK and Canada, bringing designers from Uganda and Cambodia and South Africa together and asking how do we build excellently in the locations that we're at. And R&D takes those questions and says, ooh, some of these are really important and we want to spend additional time on them. A couple of the things that I think about is how are we collecting data that are going to support our design decisions? How are we creating tools to help our designers? So just, and the idea is that allows us to then design better for all of our projects, whether that is more appropriate to the context we're in or to a higher degree of technical excellence or a more affordable design so that more ministries can afford our services. So just a couple of the things I've been involved in. This is a low-cost rain gauge that I installed in several locations in Cambodia that's providing rainfall data, which our civil engineers need to be able to do good wastewater design, stormwater design there. This is a part of an automated percolation tester. So that's a test that we have to do for wastewater design. And our department a couple years ago decided, ooh, as an organization, we don't do this test very well. So we designed a device to do that both better and more conveniently for our all of our engineers in the field. And this is a solar kiln that dries timber for our fabrication shop in Uganda that has cut the drying time from 4 to 6 months if we're drying the timber outside to 4 to 6 weeks if it's going through this kiln. So it's been really, again, really fun to be a part of this team, small team in terms of the large organization that is challenging us to think about the way we're doing things and try to do them better so that we can more effectively serve all of these ministries that God is using to touch people all over the world. We are based in Uganda. I'm based in Uganda, so only back in the US every so often, but really grateful for the opportunity to do that work there and really try and understand the context in which we're building. As an organization, we also care a whole lot about discipleship, right? The design is kind of exciting thing to talk about. Oh, we're engineers and architects, we love that. But we really also have a heart for discipleship in our organization. One example is our intern program, which I help run in the Uganda office. So we have 6 to 8 interns who come twice a year. This is one cohort from several years ago. There are 4 countries represented here. Force them to all live together so they can figure out how to deal with each other, but also give them very intentional discipleship and mentoring, not just professionally, but also spiritually. And really wonderful to see the growth that happens during this time. I myself was an intern back in 2016, and I can testify that it was a very forming experience for me. And I also get mentorship myself, both from the organization and just from being involved in the Ugandan church. This is a picture of me and some friends at a class that we took about traditional African religious worldview and the way it impacts our understanding of the gospel. So just being there gives me opportunities to both give and receive from the local church, like many of you do here. So I'm, again, extremely grateful for this opportunity. This church has been supporting me since 2021. But actually has been supporting me personally for much longer than that. I've got like a little, oh, wait, I forgot about this. I also occasionally get to travel to see other missionaries, so y'all might recognize these guys. I actually was on a work trip. It was a work trip down to Tanzania to evaluate a water system run by a seminary there, but managed to hang out with the Pikes for a bit, which was really encouraging. So. Yeah, that's just a lot of fun. So I showed this slide to give a little bit of background about myself. Mostly it's, I went to school for way too long. There is like a cool story about me being in college and really feeling convicted. I love engineering. I want to use engineering to serve people, and then to serve people who can't pay for it. And that's very challenging to figure out. Engineers are usually very expensive, and God eventually leading me on this winding road to EMI. But the thing I want to talk about right now is that I'm from New Hampshire, and I'm from here, right? I'm from this church. I wasn't just baby Jesus. I was like here the whole time. And I'm so grateful for that. Here's the only picture I could find is me and my brother Pete in front of the Royal Rangers Outpost 4 dugout canoe, I think in 2001. There's a timestamp on this picture. But just being part of this community for all of my life has been so incredibly forming, and is a big part of the reason why I was open to the call to go to Africa for missions, right? Like our youth group was busing unchurched kids from Rochester to Barrington, right? Just being in that community and seeing those values and being challenged to put the kingdom of God first. I really appreciate that. So thank you not only for what you're doing now, but for everything that you've done throughout my life. I hope you feel a part of this, and I'm really grateful to be able to share it with you. If you want to talk more, I have lots more I could say. I'll be around after the service. I'd love to connect with you.
Something that I've noticed is that when we look at the Christmas story, we tend to avoid the villain. But every story has a villain, even Christmas movies. One of the most famous, in my opinion, Christmas villains is the Grinch. Everybody knows the Grinch, and I feel as if The Grinch is having a bit of a renaissance at the moment. I think every kid that I know is obsessed with the Grinch. You could go to Hobby Lobby. There's a whole aisle dedicated to Grinch-themed things. So you could have your house looking like Whoville. It really is just having a moment right now. And so we use this term Grinch when we see someone or we notice someone who does not have Christmas spirit. And we throw that term around and we label them, oh, you Grinch. And so that is one Christmas villain that we know. But the Christmas story has a villain too. And Scripture shows us someone who was genuinely threatened by Christmas. Herod the Great. And as we look at Herod, we learn that Christmas isn't just about a baby being born, but it is about a king being revealed. So we're going to be today in the chapter 2 of Matthew. And right in the beginning of this chapter is where we first learn about Herod and we first get introduced to him. So starting in verse 1, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw this star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." So right there in verse 1, we learn about Herod. And it's not by accident that Herod was mentioned, because it's very important that Jesus was born under King Herod. But who was Herod the Great? It's first important to note that he was an illegitimate king of Israel. He was an appointed king. He wasn't a descendant of Jacob, so he wasn't naturally there for the throne, but he was appointed. He was rather a descendant of Esau. So, just at the start, we know that Herod was an illegitimate king. But we also know that he really was great. He's given that name. He's remembered as Herod the Great because he had great wealth. He had great political strategy. He was able to have a good relationship with successive Roman emperors. His foes, they would admire his work. He was a great administrator. His famine relief was superb. His building projects, including the rebuilding of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, are renowned. And some of his architectural structures are still standing to this day. I mean, this was a great man who held a lot of power. He was a powerful king. But he was also great in cruelty. Because of his power and because of his illegitimate reign of Jerusalem, he was very paranoid. And anyone who seemed like a threat to his throne, to his power, to his rules, he would kill family members. He would kill associates because they were deemed a threat by him. And so he was always on guard. He was always on guard against any threat that might come to him, to his throne. So he was great in power and also in cruelty. So then, as we continue in chapter 2, we see that a threat comes against him. Here is this great king. And verse 2 says, where is the newborn king of the Jews? This is what the wise men are saying as they come to Herod. Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw this star as it rose, and we have come to worship him. And then verse 3, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. And if we jump down to verse 6, this is a quote of a prophecy that, "O you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people, Israel." So Herod hears this word. He hears this prophecy that a king was going to be born, and the wise men are coming and they're seeking him. They're seeking this king, and so here's this threat. Here is Herod in all his power, who has killed associates and family members, and here he hears that a new king has been born. Now, he doesn't necessarily realize what this means, the King of the Jews. When he hears King of the Jews, he doesn't hear the Son of God. He just hears a threat to his throne. And so he starts scheming. If we continue on in Matthew, it says he called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" And that's where we see in Bethlehem of Judea, as we just read. And so he's seeking, and he calls the wise men to him and asks, Go search for him. Go seek for this king. And when you find him, I will worship him too. But this seems kind of contradictory to what we know about Herod, someone who loves power, who's always on guard. This is contradictory to want to go and worship a different king. We see this as a fear that's starting. Well, I want to know who this king is that's coming for my throne. And then the ultimate villain of Christmas strikes. And worse than wanting to steal Christmas, he wanted to kill it. Matthew 2:16, Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. So last week, when we learned about the wise men and their heart to seek after Jesus, we saw that they found their way to Jesus, that they sought him, that they found him, and they worshiped him. But they did not tell Herod that they had found him or where to find him. And so Herod was furious. He'd been outwitted. He could not find this king who was a threat to himself. And so he sent soldiers to kill all of the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men report of the star's first appearance. This baby Jesus, this lowly baby born in a manger, was a threat to this powerful king. Now we know that Jesus was not killed as a baby, that despite this tragedy, this greedy and cruel king who would kill every baby just to get to this king, just to retain his throne and retain his power, we know that Jesus was not killed. Instead, he grew up and he lived a life where he proclaimed about the kingdom of God. The kingdom that had come to earth when he was born as a king in a manger. And what a beautiful thing it is to know that. That the King of Kings got to live a life proclaiming his ways. And now, before we distance ourselves from Herod, we need to ask a harder question. Who gets to be king? See, Christmas confronts our kingship. And we all have a little bit of Herod in us, though we might not want to admit it. The Herod in me is a need for control. And I'm not talking about the kind of control of other people, of having other people do what I want them to do and things to go the way that I want them to go, but I'm talking about control in my life. I like to have a plan. I like to have things in order and know exactly what I'm supposed to do and when I'm supposed to do it. And so when I think about my life and the dreams that God has given me and the goals that I have, I can get very tight-fisted with them and think, well, if you told me this, then this is how it's supposed to go. I like to have control of my life and think that I have better plans. And I often find myself praying the same prayer again and again, where I say, God, I know that you have good plans for me. I know that your ways are better, but here's what I'm thinking. We could have this timeline, this thing that you spoke to me, if we could just have this, in 3 months, that would be great. If I could just have this right now, then that would be great. And I know you have good plans, God, but here's my 2 cents. And that's a prayer that I have prayed many a times, of trying to take back the things that I'd already surrendered to God, because I just have this need to have a plan, to be in control, to know what's ahead, instead of just surrendering that and leaving it at the feet of Jesus. So that's my characteristic of Herod, is just wanting to retain that power, that control that I have in my life. And that could look different for all of us. And I'm sure there's many other ways that I try and take control, or other ways that I try and do what I want because I want to do it. And, well, God can't tell me I can't do that. Does he want me to be happy? There's just this way. There's just these things that we do where we just try to retain the power in our lives. We try to be our own king. And I'm very guilty of that. But not every response has to be like Herod's. You know why the Grinch is such an iconic Christmas character? Well, first, I think that Jim Carrey did wonders for it. That's a very memorable character for me because of Jim Carrey's performance. Really transformed it. But it's because he experienced a transformation. He experienced transformation, and he was met with the spirit of Christmas and the heart of Christmas. But we get to experience an even greater transformation because we get to meet the King. We get to meet the King who will transform our lives, who will rule in peace. We get to meet a transformed heart and a new life. Not just the spirit of Christmas, but the reason that we celebrate Christmas. We get to meet Jesus. So we have the opportunity to experience an even greater transformation as we meet Christ. But if we're going to meet this King, if we're going to meet him, it's probably important to know a little bit about him. If we're going to ask that question, well, who gets to be king? If I want to retain being king of my life, I got to know who I'm trying to give it to. Scripture shows us that Jesus, not only is he king, but it shows us what kind of king he is. In Isaiah 9, starting in verse 6, for unto us a child is born, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor, David, for all eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. That's the kind of king that was born. If we look at Herod, we see a king who is fearful, controlling, who doesn't deserve the throne. But when we're met with Jesus, we see one who rules in wisdom, who has all of the strength, who brings peace. He is the Prince of Peace. And so he's the kind of king that comes into our life and brings that peace to us, that brings that wisdom and that guidance and that power and that strength. Whereas we're like Herod in our own lives, ruling with fear, not wanting to let go, scared that things aren't going to go our way, holding tightly to the sin in our lives, or to just the materials that we want to hold on to. In worship today, we sang about a king of light who will not stop pursuing us until total healing is brought to our heart. We sang about a King of Kings who was sent to this earth and who lived on this earth and who now reigns. That's the kind of king who is offering to be our king. So if Christmas confronts our kingship, then we must decide who gets to be king. And the gospel is a threat to our kingship. I think when we talk about the gospel, a lot of times we talk about the grace and the love, and that is central to the gospel. But when we're met with that grace and that love, it confronts our kingship, our pride. It is a threat to the way that we are doing things. It is a threat to our control. And so the gospel asks us the question, who will be the king of your life? And it's in a good way, because as we read about Jesus in Isaiah, this is a king who brings peace, who brings wisdom, who brings forgiveness and love. This morning, as we were singing that song, King of Life, it really just hit me that the King of Light would come into our darkness, would come into our mess, into our lives as we're holding tightly to the things that we're doing or the things that we think they should be this way. He comes to us in that grace and that love, and that threat to our kingship is a gentle offer that we can release control, that we can have healing, and we can have true freedom. Freedom from our sin, and freedom from the things that plague us, that we can walk in freedom with a new king. So as the band comes up and we close, that's the question that I have for you today. Who will be the king of your life? Who will be the king of your heart? We're standing here today and we have a choice between our own fearful control, just like Herod, wanting to wipe out any threat against us. But as we have the Christmas season and as we're just this week celebrating the birth of Jesus, we have a chance to look at that baby who came in humility, who came as a light in the darkness, to come and bring us new life, to bring us a new way to do life. That is the invitation we have this morning.